Hey, my name is Alan. I'm a Russian qualified lawyer. I work here in Geneva. I volunteer at Human Rights Center Memorial. It was closed in Russia, but it's still active, and we are helping people write complaints to the European Court of Human Rights, or we counsel if they are detained.
Russian by origin. I live in Switzerland, so I have a Russian-Swiss citizenship. I'm very concerned about what is going on in Russia, also about the war in Ukraine, and that's why I decided to join.
Hi, my name is Katrina, and I joined La Russie du Futur. So I joined 2 years ago in April, as soon as I moved to Geneva. So I moved from Moscow to Geneva after of the war with Ukraine. I'm a political asylum seeker. Russia of the Future started manifestations against war in front of the United Nations. We do a lot of initiative for helping Ukraine, first of all, and we work with Swiss politicians, and we work against Russian propaganda in the European Union.
Well, it's hard to describe it in one word or very quickly. Everything is forbidden unless it is de facto allowed. What this law says one thing, and the other is how it practice works. In order to protest something, in order to come and express your opinion in public, you have to get an approval from a state. It's very hard to get. And with coronavirus, they found a legitimate excuse. And at some point, they restricted even one person standalone protesting. But it depends mostly on the aim of the protest. If you want to say bomb more cities in Ukraine, easy to get an approval for this kind of manifestation. But you have a different purpose, the purpose that people in power would think that is linked to people being not agreeing with the government, then you will have no chance of getting it for various excuses. So there are many tactics to restrict it de facto, although in terms of law, it may not look just as bad as North Korea, for example, but still, compared to European countries, even the law went, deteriorated a lot during these 2 years of war.
So people that has been imprisoned trying to protest against what Russia has been doing in Ukraine, even the silent protests were restricted and many people got the sentences for this. I don't remember the exact number of the political prisoners, but it exceeds hundreds of them. Yeah, there are well-known names and less-known names, and they're still imprisoned for something very neutral when the person has been replacing the stickers in the shop of St. Petersburg. The lady, a painter, and I think she got 7 years of sentence. The human rights and many organizations that existed in Russia do not exist anymore because they were first announced foreign agents, and after that they were announced unwanted or organizations, and some of them were restricted.
The last year, November 23, it was 1,667 political prisoners in Russia. Our organization works with political prisoners in Russia. Actually, we organize actions, letters for political prisoners. I was arrested 3 times. Once I just put a green ribbon on a fence close to the metro station. The green ribbon was a symbol of resistance against the war. And two policemen got me, and I spent in the police almost the entire day. Another, I was walking back from the protest from station against the war, and I was stopped again by two policemen. I was already far from the meeting point. I was arrested again. Post on like stop the war, just 3 words, and it's enough to be arrested and to be imprisoned. So in Russia, no one is safe. You can be arrested for anything.
Speaking about the minority rights, let's separate the minorities that are, let's say, the nations that are resided in Russia, like, for example, Buryats and some other nations, and those that come in to work there, like Tajiks. And when you speak about the minorities that are originally from the Russian Federation, let's say their rights are not completely, they are not suppressed. For example, when we think about the mobilization, which has been happening because of the Ukrainian war, a big part of the military force, if you think about the percentage rates, were coming from these minorities. We don't know for sure because the numbers are not officially public, but what we know from different sources that based on the number of deaths or dead soldiers reported as a result of the military actions, the minority nations are overrepresented in those deaths, which means most likely they were the most called minorities to serve in the Russian forces. And when we think about the minorities that are coming on the temporary basis, like immigrants, which is Tajiks, Uzbeks, etc., after the terror attack in Crocus City Hall, which has happened recently, there were a number of actions that the Russian authorities are doing to put some pressure on the official registration of those people that are residing in the country. And there are cases when people have to leave the country, and there are cases that people are arrested just being a representation of this particular nation. And that happens from time to time. Russia needs those immigrants because those immigrants represent a significant workforce. But when something like that happens, immediately those nations are becoming suppressed.
LGBTQ communities that hardest hit, I guess, in the recent years. So the whole movement was declared extremist. So they were considered illegal, which doesn't make sense in a way that it's not an organization. It's not a movement, really. It's rather people's identification or their sexual preferences. Basically, the trend for the traditional values is taking a toll on LGBTQ people. They're restricted from expressing their emotions, from saying that I'm gay or saying that I'm a lesbian. It's now a crime to do that.
It gets stricter and stricter. Previously, there were just laws, and but there were no criminal cases. But since a couple of months, there were a couple of the criminal cases going on already. The times before the war, the international pressure was quite important, and that's why many of the things that were, let's say, kind of making Russia more democratic or more open were happening. But it was a long time ago. But at least until the start of the war, it still had an impact. Since the war has started and many international organizations has been forced to exit Russia, the level of influence of international or not residing in Russia organizations became much less important. Of course, Russia is still part of the world, and international pressure should exist, but the impact of it on the internal decisions that are made in Russia became much less important. But the international pressure should continue, because without that, you don't know what's going to happen there in Russia.
There was some pressure, and from my purely legal perspective, I think international advocacy in Russia was only the European Courts of Human Rights, something that Russia paid attention to. Human rights organizations, even domestic ones such as Memorial, had no sense for the Russian government, and it really didn't care. The system works like this, that the European Court issues a decision, and then the Russian court has to take it into account and revise, do a retrial, and consider this decision in its ruling, in its consideration for the case. And it ended up at the Constitutional Court of Russia, the highest court on these matters. And the court said, well, my decisions are more important than European Courts of Human Rights. And after that, we had a number of decisions in the same trend, and eventually Russia left the European Council. So I don't think, in summary, that there's anything that can help Russia at this point, but maybe later when when time does its, does its assistance to the Russian people.
It was a joke. I just wanted to say that we need to change president, government, everything to zero, build a new country, and maybe it will work.
The international pressure should exist, and there are institutions like United Nations, etc., that still have an impact. Less and less, but still Russia is part of those organizations, and they need to at least listen to the opinions of others. And being a part of the global world, it may help, but the impact will be definitely limited, because internally those organizations has little or no influence on the decisions. From the external perspective, yes, the pressure should continue. From the internal perspective, I believe it's very difficult and even not safe for international organizations to act to try to defend the human rights in Russia these days. So,
well, there are still venues for Russian people to seek justice outside of Russia. It is quite difficult for local organizations because they lack funding. They don't have any grants from Russian state. They support people who usually have no money themselves. But these people do need help. And these issues, when they brought up at the European Courts of Human Rights, I don't know exactly if it still takes applications, but maybe it still considers application that was filed in the past. So what international community could do is to help domestic Russian human rights organizations in filing these complaints, in reviewing maybe the drafts of the complaints and guiding, because we also don't have a lot of lawyers who deal with this. And I don't think there are many lawyers in general doing human rights, but if international community could help on this front, assisting the local human rights organizations, that would be amazing. And I think they're brave, the local ones, and they do need support. So it would be amazing if people would not forget about them.